To the online catechism. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at the Seventh Commandment. What is the Seventh Commandment? Well, the Seventh Commandment tells us, you shall not steal. And what does that mean? Well, Martin Luther in his small catechism tells us that this means that we should fear and love God so that we do not take our neighbor's money or possessions or get them in any dishonest way, but help him to improve and protect his possessions and income. No, we're not to take anything that is our neighbor's, and we're not trying to get something that is our neighbor's using any form of deceit. And finally, where we have opportunity, we want to help him both keep and improve the things that he has. Why do we care about possessions at all? Well, we care because we understand that these things are God's gifts to our neighbors. In Psalm 104, verse 14 through 15, it says, you cause the grass to grow for the livestock and the plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. So yes, we understand that God brings forth good things for all people, but then he entrusts those things to particular people. So no, we do not believe that everything is just everyone's. No, God passes out his gifts in the measure he wishes to each individual person. And that is why we care then about these possessions, because they are a sign of what God has chosen to do. And therefore, just like we would not like anyone to take or destroy our possessions, we also understand that we want to guard those possessions of our neighbor. The first kind of stealing that we might think of when we hear this commandment is what I've entitled here old-fashioned stealing. Here you see the guy running away from the bank, so to speak. So here we think of shoplifting and pickpocketing and robbing a literal bank or breaking into a home. And certainly these all fit the commandments, where we're just going out and literally taking something that is not ours. And sadly, this is all the more common than we wish it were, and no doubt even those listening to this video might think of a time when they have taken something directly that was not theirs. What does the Lord say about this kind of stealing? Well, he simply says this in Isaiah 61, verse 8, for I, the Lord, love justice, I hate robbery and wrong. God hates stealing, and that makes sense. That's why he has placed it here as one of the 10 commandments that he has given to his people, that we should not be a people of robbery, rather we should be a people of justice. But it's not only those who literally just go somewhere and take something that is not theirs who end up stealing from their neighbor. We might recognize that there is a temptation often to steal things at work. First, we might think of stealing actual items, whether that it would be a ream of copy paper or a particular pen that we like or mouse that we like, anything like that, where we're simply taking something that's not ours out of the office and taking it into our homes. While we may never get caught, quote unquote, for that, and it may not seem like a big deal at the time, indeed, we are taking something that is not ours. So for us Christians, we should understand that as a big deal. The other thing is we might be thinking about giving away things to friends that are not ours to give away. So here, perhaps the easiest example of this is to think of the kid that is working at the cinema, and he sort of just keeps passing his friends through the entrance without paying. Or perhaps they order a popcorn and he gives them a popcorn and a soda. Again, at the time, it seems like this is not really a big deal. Maybe it almost seems like it is a perk of the job. But unless one has been told that they can do this for their friends, again, they are simply stealing from the one who owns these things. And so we want to be people of integrity in this way, that even if our friends would like it, we are not free to give away things that we have access to at work. We could also say these last two on the list sort of go together. Sleeping at work or not doing what you are paid to do are also ways of stealing from our neighbor. For if we're sleeping at work and someone is paying us money in order to work, well, we are taking the money and not giving them the work, and that is a form of theft. The same thing if we are, say, again, if we think about a teenager and they are paid to go get the carts out from the parking lot, and yet they decide that they will stand outside and talk to their friend for 20 minutes, and yet still will accept their full pay, well, again, that is a way they are stealing from their neighbor, in this case, the owner of that business. Ephesians 4:28 tells us what to do instead. It says, "Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need." Yes, not only are we not to take from our neighbor, but we are also to work with our hands to produce things in order that we might be able to share something with someone in need rather than taking something from them. What other forms of theft might we think about? Well, as the meaning to the commandment told us, there is also a form of stealing which comes through dishonest dealings. Here we might say, as the general title, this would be stealing through deceit. First, we might make a deal that we know to only be a good deal for ourselves. We could take a couple examples here. One might be selling a car that we know is not in good running condition, and yet doing something to it or giving the impression to the one who is buying the car that it is in good running condition, or like I said, doing something to it so it appears to be in good running condition. Again, we might say, well, the other person bought the car. They should have had it checked out. But again, if we know for certain that the value of the thing that we are selling is of one value, and yet we charge more in order to make out good, well, we are stealing from our neighbor again. We are taking their money for something that is not of equal value. The other example there that we might have is that if someone is trading goods, they may well know what something is worth and the other person might not. So we could imagine a lady going over to some other lady's house and noticing that a particular piece of serving ware or glassware is from a particular company that they well know is worth a lot of money. And they might offer again to buy it, but at a very low rate, acting as if they just love the color. Again, that would be stealing from our neighbor through a deceitful means. The last thing is that we could try to take advantage of someone who is in trouble. Perhaps the classic example of this that I hear about often is that when we have a farm wife whose husband dies, oftentimes there will be other people in the area or even from outside of the area that will come to that farm wife and express their condolences, then make a very lowball offer on the farm. They might say something like, "Oh gosh, this is a terrible time for you, and now you're going to have all this stuff to do to figure out the value of everything and who you would sell it to and how you would sell it. Why don't I just buy it off you, and then you'll be done with all of that trouble?" Now, of course, I suppose there could be a way in which that same statement would be an act of love towards the neighbor if the offer is not a lowball offer, if the offer is in fact for the reasonable value of the things being purchased. But the example I often hear is people just making an offer that is way low because they are trusting that perhaps this spouse left behind does not know the value of a lot of the machinery or the land that is owned. Again, this would be stealing from our neighbor, and it won't save us at all when we're before God to say, well, they signed the contract, so therefore it's okay. Leviticus 6:2 says, "If anyone sins and commits a breach of faith against the Lord by deceiving his neighbor in a manner of deposit or security, or through robbery, or if he has oppressed his neighbor." This section is just telling us all sorts of things here that the Lord does not like, and we get told here that this could be a matter where we're deceiving a neighbor regarding a deposit or security. We didn't even talk about that we might be, offering someone to invest in something that we know is not a good deal. But all of these kind of things where we're trying to trick someone in order that we might take what is theirs so that it might become ours, all of these are ways that the scriptures would tell us we are stealing from our neighbor. The last overall category that I've given for us to discuss today is that of high-tech stealing. And here I mean any sort of stealing that would be done with the aid of technology. It wasn't many years ago when downloading music illegally and software and movies were quite a common occurrence. In fact, so common that entire companies had to change how they charge for music and movies and software. As we see now, you often can contract with a company to get access to all sorts of these things for one rate, and that's certainly fine in our day and age to do, but we're always still tempted to try to get that thing a little cheaper even yet. So if we can find it and download it, or if we can borrow someone else's login code and use that to get into this service or that service so that we don't have to pay for it directly. Again, we must recognize that this too is stealing. I think why we are perhaps most easily tempted to this kind of thing is that we don't see another person on the other end of this. We forget that there are people that have created that music or that software, who have created all of these different things that we're watching, and we forget that when we watch those things or download them without their permission, we're actually stealing from them. For instance, back in the day, if you downloaded a whole CD's worth of music, that was certainly no different than walking into a big box retailer and taking the CD out of the store without paying for it. But we often don't think of it the same, although we should. There is always a neighbor that is being harmed, and that neighbor may be quite wealthy. That's another way we justify this. But even if our neighbor is wealthy beyond all means, it does not give us the right to take the things that God has given to them. The other thing we might mention here in our day is identity theft, where someone takes information that they've retrieved in some way through the internet or through some other means, then tries to open credit cards or make other sorts of payments using that information. Again, this is certainly a way that people steal from others. And again, I think they often feel justified because they see these people they're stealing from as sort of nameless and faceless. But indeed, as the person on the other end of the identity theft knows, they are being robbed, not only of their goods, but also of their security. Romans 2:21 says, "While you preach against stealing, do you steal?" And I put that verse with this one because, again, this one seems to be very easy to justify for a lot of people. And so we want to remember that if we're going to stand up and say, hey, that guy who just took that thing out of Walmart without paying for it should go to jail, and yet then we go home later and decide that we'll log in with someone else's account to view a movie or to get some music, well, we indeed are stealing as well, and we should indeed confess that sin. Yes, this is the seventh commandment where we're told to not steal. We're not to just outright take something. We're not to try to get something in a dishonest way. We're not to take money for work that we have not done, and we're not to use technology as an easy way to steal from others. No, indeed, these are all good gifts that God gives to our neighbor, and so we are to protect them, and if we have the chance, even to improve their possessions for them. But we certainly are never to steal. Thanks for checking out the online catechism today.